Good afternoon, everyone. It's noon, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Wild at Work. My name is Megan Pineda. I'm the Adult Education Specialist with Texas Wildlife Association. Joining us today is Bethany Foshee. Bethany comes to us from the Coastal Prairie Conservancy team. She has extensive experience working with Houston's environmental nonprofits. Bethany oversees outreach programs and stewardship activities on Coastal Prairie Conservancy's protected lands. In her role as project manager of the Nature's Burial Initiative, Bethany will guide individuals and families as they honor their loved ones, facilitate customer sales, coordinate community development, and manage day-to-day operations. Bethany holds a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife and Fisheries Sciences and a Master's of Science in Recreation, Park and Tourism Sciences from Texas A&M University. Bethany is also a licensed funeral director. Fun fact. Welcome to Wild at Work, Bethany. We're glad to have you here. Before I turn the reins over to you, I would like to remind everyone that's hanging out with us today to keep yourself muted throughout the duration of the webinar. We will have the chat box open. Please feel free to continue a conversation in the chat, ask questions. We will get to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. So we're going to give Bethany the reins and go ahead and let you screen share and let you get started.
All right. Thank you, Megan. Let me give PowerPoint 1 second to catch up with me. And thanks everybody for joining today. I'm excited to share all about prairies. Okay. So again, as Megan said, my name is Bethany Foshee. I grew up in the Houston area. I now live in Belleville, and my work is based on the Katy Prairie. And I've worked in the environmental, nonprofit, and parks world since I was 12, really. I started volunteering for a wildlife rehab hospital and found my calling. And my first official job when I was 19, I took care of prairie chickens at the Houston Zoo. So I've had a fond connection and appreciation for prairies ever since that first real job during college. So I'm happy to share with all of you, and I'm sure there are many prairie fans in the room. My talk today will focus more on the coastal prairie on our Gulf Coast, but I know y'all are from all over Texas today, so we'll talk about more broad grassland topics as well. And I'd love to take questions at the end, and we should have plenty of time for that too. All right. So if you're not familiar with Coastal Prairie Conservancy, our mission is to sustain a resilient Texas by preserving coastal prairies, including wetlands, farms, and ranches to benefit people and wildlife forever. And we get to use that word forever because we are a land trust. So we protect land in perpetuity forever through partnerships with landowners and through protecting lands that are donated to us or that we purchase and we add to our preserve system, which is on the historic Katy Prairie. Many of you may have seen this map before. A lot of people have not, so we always show it. This shows the original extent of the coastal prairie, which once covered roughly 9 million acres from South Texas all the way over to central Louisiana near Lafayette, and that's where they call it the Cajun Prairie. Today, the coastal prairie is incredibly endangered. There's less than 1% of it left. And in Louisiana, they estimate only about 100 acres left. And when I say left, I mean unaltered, remnant prairie, never been plowed, never been highly modified by humans. There are certainly prairie landscapes across Texas and Louisiana that may have been modified by agriculture or parceled up, but still have really high quality plants. So those prairies are really still valuable and worth restoring and protecting. But when we look for remnant prairies, they're very rare, and we're very excited when we locate any of those. If we expand out even further, this is a wonderful map showing the original extent of North America's tallgrass prairies. And this was once our largest contiguous biome. It covered about 170 million acres of land. And you can see on the map, it extended from Canada, again, all the way to South Texas through the middle of what we call America's heartland. And we'll talk about this in a couple slides, but now people call it the breadbasket. So, what happened to this biome, our grassland biome? Because today, less than 5% of this biome is left unaltered as remnant, beautiful, never plowed prairie. And here's a lovely photo from the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Oklahoma, a wonderful place that's owned by the Nature Conservancy. And this is what our continent looked like in the middle, all the way down to Texas. So today we'll start our talk by learning what happened to this incredible biome that was so huge and vast that early explorers described it as an ocean or a sea of grass. This is an interesting map that provides some cultural insight into what happened to this prairie. You'll notice that grasslands are pretty common across planet Earth, certainly across the mid regions that are on either side of the equator. And these regions tend, where you see grasslands, oops, someone needs to mute. These grasslands tend to get less rainfall, so they don't support forests, but they get more rainfall than desert areas, and so they're in that middle area typically. What I want you to notice on this map, though, is that there are actually absent grasslands in Europe. So when Europeans arrived on the North American continent, they didn't have an appreciation. They didn't understand this biome. It wasn't what they were used to or familiar with. So they lacked an appreciation for this beautiful region, other than what it could provide for the plow. The people who were here in North America, Native Americans, including the Great Plains tribes that you have heard of, the Comanche, the Tonkawa, the Apache, they made their living from our grasslands. And of course, they hunted bison, and they moved and migrated with those herds all through that contiguous biome. Here in Texas, if we zoom in, this is an illustration of what the Karankawa people and the Acokisa people looked like in our region. There's also an early Spanish map I have on the screen, and this is actually of what is today called the San Jacinto River that goes into Houston. And on this map, they were naming it for the Acokisa people who lived and migrated along that river. Like the other Plains tribes, the Acokisa and the other Atakapa tribes, they followed the prairies, they followed the bison. They built temporary shelters. This is a sketch of a shelter made out of palm fronds from native palmettos. And they traded with other tribes. They were able to get stones and even copper from the Great Lakes. So these are photos of artifacts found in Houston, arrow points, pottery shards made from native clay. And this is a really interesting photo of one of the last seen Tonkawa encampments. And I'm double checking, it was in the 1870s, and they were using bison hide and temporary saplings to create a shelter as they moved. PowerPoint thinking. Wait a second. There we go. All right. So this is a beautiful illustration of a bison herd on the grassland, and the Native American people were hunting these animals, but also they were managing grassland ecosystems to help with these large herbivores, bison, deer, pronghorns. And what happened when Europeans arrived is the prairie then met two things. It met the plow and the cow. So Europeans who came to what became the United States began parceling up those vast grasslands. They began overhunting bison, and they began plowing those open grasslands, because what they did appreciate was the incredible deep fertile soils with no giant trees in the way of that plow. So very soon, with early settlers like the Austin colonies here in Texas, these lands became parceled up. So the prairie met fence lines, barbed wire, domestic cattle, and over time, increasing infrastructure. You see this bottom right photo, that's a wheat field in 1976. And to the untrained eye, maybe it looks a lot like a prairie, but that's a monoculture of one crop that's obviously not a native species. So it was highly easy to modify. It was easy to begin intensive agriculture. And then, even after agriculture, the prairie has met other challenges, which we face today, which is the creep of humanity, concrete housing, and even infrastructure like solar farms that may be good for energy production, but are sometimes placed on grasslands, which then removes the value of that habitat. So, fighting development is a bigger challenge when you're in a grassland. The other challenge for prairies is that they're not as charismatic. So this is a picture of a hiker hugging a redwood. There are charismatic megafauna like elephants, and then there are charismatic ecosystems like rainforests, coral reefs, the redwoods of California, the Rocky Mountains. Prairies and grasslands are not as immediately appealing to people. So we have this challenge of getting people excited and training people to take a little more time and appreciate the biodiversity and the incredible ecological benefits of a prairie. Another answer to this question, what happened to all those prairies? Why does so little remain? Is that prairies have to have disturbance in order to thrive. This ecoregion evolved with fire, with drought and flood, and with grazers. These are some great images and maps from Dan Worrell's book, A Prehistory of Houston and Southeast Texas. I highly recommend this book if you don't have a copy. And this map shows where there have been sites located with bison and deer remains. And then this image is from an 1886 drawing called Prairie Fire. And it was a Virginia settler who observed Native Americans setting fires in order to help with a deer hunt, but also to help manage and maintain open grassland. The grasslands of North America evolved all the way back in the last ice age, a million years ago in the Pleistocene. There were other big mammals grazing our prairies before there were bison, and these were animals like the Columbian mammoth and the mastodon. And again, from Dan's book, this shows sites where we have found fossil remains of tapirs, mastodons, mammoths, camels, horses, ancient ground sloths, ancient bison, and camels, even. So we know that these animals were shaping this ecosystem and maintaining it. And once you remove those ice age mammals, and then once you remove bison, you start to lose your prairies. You start to be encroached by brush and invasive tree species. So I'll shift gears now and we'll talk about why prairies are important. Why should we care about prairies? Because this is probably the number one question we get when we give this talk to people. So one of the main values of prairies is that incredible biodiversity. On our prairies here in Texas, we may not have wild bison herds anymore. We don't have very many greater prairie chickens or Atwater's prairie chickens. There are areas where there were pronghorns. They're not as common. Same with Texas horned lizard. And then, of course, the red wolf, which was extirpated from our region. Animals that we do have that we still want people to get excited about, animals that are pretty easy to attract, even to a pocket prairie, green anoles, meadowlarks, this hognose snake, and then migratory species like the monarch. Another important group of animals that rely on prairies and build our biodiversity are grassland birds, ducks, and geese. This is a chart showing the loss of birds in North America since roughly 1970. And if you look on the bottom right, you'll see grassland birds are the most affected group of birds since that in this 50-year span. So since 1970, we've lost 43% of our individual grassland birds. We've lost roughly 3 billion birds since 1970. And up here, interestingly, the dabbling ducks, geese, waterfowl, populations had been climbing up until about 2005 or so, but even they have seen about a 20% drop in recent years. And so we're also trying to stem the tide of this decline. We don't want to lose our waterfowl. So providing prairies for them also means providing prairie potholes and wetlands for those species, which they desperately need. One that really speaks to all people who have experienced a flood, like we did in Houston with Hurricane Harvey, is the fact that prairies act as a sponge. So my next slide will show those pictures. Prairies slow the water, hold water, and absorb water. And all those root systems from those deep-rooted prairie plants have evolved to create giant sponges, which do a great job. Just like last night, we had about 1.5 inches of rain. And it's interesting when you walk a prairie after a rain, it certainly does feel spongy. And it's not standing water like we're used to in an urban landscape. You just feel that sponginess underfoot when you walk across it. When we speak with government elected officials, city planners, we remind them of the ecological benefits. They have a monetary economic value. So this was estimated at $177 million for the Katy Prairie, that storage of floodwater that we're providing to downstream Houston. We also had partners at the Speed Center who did a study on flood retention. And what we like to show people is that a grass is not a grass. The native species that evolved here, because of those deep roots, they're able to soak up about 8 inches of rainfall per hour during a rain event. An open space that may have a mix of native species and non-native can soak up about 2 inches per hour. And then a developed property that has more pavement and mowed manicured grasses, it's only about a 1/2 inch per hour. So this is a vast difference. And that's because of these amazing root systems. Back in the Pleistocene, when many of these species began evolving and are found in the fossil evidence, they began evolving these root systems. And there's one that's really famous, the compass plant. You can see this taproot that forms. And these plants live for decades, continuing to drink up water and maintain fresh water on the landscape rather than it just running off where we lose that fresh water that we need. This other diagram shows switchgrass on the left, where you can see those 14-foot deep roots compared to that man standing next to them. And we actually have this same diagram in our Welcome Center on the Katy Prairie. The other fun species, this is Kentucky bluegrass. You could also replace that with St. Augustine in your lawn. We like to show people this so they can understand quickly the root system is very different when you continually mow a non-native turf grass versus when you let your native prairie species grow over years. Another key benefit that prairies provide for us is carbon storage. Trees certainly store carbon, but prairies do as well, which helps combat climate change, greenhouse gases. They are soaking up carbon for us every day. That's what plants do for us. And what's better about prairies, if we're competing with forests, is that they continually store the carbon underground. Trees are storing the bulk of their carbon above ground in that tree trunk. And so when that tree does rot away, that carbon does decompose back into the atmosphere. But prairies that carbon stays put through fires, through droughts, through floods, through storms, because it's all being stored underground. So there's some quick facts that were calculated. Basically, there's 2,500 billion tons of carbon in soils globally. And if you restored 500 acres of prairie, you would have the potential to sequester 900 tons of carbon. And even smaller scale, 1 acre of prairie land can sequester 5 tons of carbon. So even small projects in Texas are really helpful. One that's more personal to all of us is the support for local pollinators and agriculture. I would guess that many of us on the call today are gardeners, naturalists who really appreciate pollination. Animals, i.e., bees and other pollinators, service our crops. They pollinate roughly 1/3 of crops globally. And farmers used to use cover crops and buffer strips to encourage pollinators to visit their fields. This is less common today, so we try and encourage farmers to continue these practices. And pollinator habitat in the prairie also provides cover and food for other species like our songbirds, deer, rabbits, coyotes. So benefit from one species benefits us all. And then another wonderful facet of our grasslands is that they support local food and our culture. The rodeo culture in Texas, the grazing culture in Texas, that all stems from our grasslands. So there's an image of our rice field at Nelson Farms in Katy, Texas there. That's actually the last working rice farm left in Harris County. And then there's an image there of Warren Ranch and our cowboys working the cattle. We love to have visitors both to Nelson Farm and Warren Ranch so that people can see where local agriculture is still happening because it's such an important piece of our culture and for our local food delivery. Public health is really important, and having time in nature has proven time and time again to help people with healing. And so we encourage people to get out in your neighborhood prairie, whether that's at a city park or further afield in a state park or at a preserve like the Katy Prairie. There's a term called biophilia. It's this innate connection or appreciation to nature, to other living things that humans have. It just takes a moment to reconnect with that feeling. So being in nature reminds people that we exist within the world. In our modern lives, we often forget this. And prairies are where humans evolved. Humans first evolved on the savanna landscapes of Africa. So we have an innate appreciation for that type of landscape that actually soothes us and calms our physiological processes. So we love having providing access to the Katy Prairie for people to enjoy. All right. So I'm going to shift gears again and talk a little bit about the need for protection of prairies and how you can get involved. This is a series of maps showing development in West Houston where the Katy Prairie exists. So this green hash mark line is the original extent of the Katy Prairie, which was roughly 750,000 acres, extending from 610 Loop near the Galleria all the way up to what we call the Piney Woods, over to the Brazos River where the Blackland Prairies begin, and then south, just south of I-10. So the 750,000 acre area was described by early explorers here in our region, again, as an ocean or a sea of grass, with grasses as high as their horses when they would travel through. We were started as a nonprofit in 1992. And our original name was the Katy Prairie Conservancy. We began our mission with a goal of protecting at least 30,000 acres on the historic Katy Prairie. So if you fast forward, this is 1990. The gray represents developed areas, and then you've got that original extent of the Katy Prairie. If we fast forward to 2010, you'll see the gray developed areas are spreading westward across that historic landscape. But by 2010, we had protected roughly 10,000 acres of land on the historic Katy Prairie. We fast forward again to 2025, just last year, you'll see a lot more development has come to Waller County and West Harris County. But also, what's happened is we've now protected right around 20,000 acres of Katy Prairie preserve system. And our goal that we will meet in the next few years is to fill in these spaces and get to 30,000 acres of contiguous land that's permanently protected. All righty. So, the good news is that we are working with dedicated community members to restore this habitat across our region and also get more and more people involved. This is just a screenshot from the volunteer page on our website. If you're in our region, we have lots of ways to get involved, and I'll even mention a few ways to get involved if you're elsewhere in Texas. We have stewardship Saturdays once a month. We host seed collecting trips to remnant prairies from areas like Galveston, Brazoria County, up to North Harris County, west to Waller and Austin counties. Anywhere there's a remnant prairie with high quality habitat where we can get access, collect seed, it's important to us and partners like the Houston Parks Department, Memorial Park Conservancy, Houston Audubon. We all use those seeds to propagate native, true native genetic species. We have our native seed nursery at the Indian Grass Preserve. We have volunteers there with us every Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. We also have a docent program where people can teach and lead tours at our grassland preserves. We also have volunteers like our board members, committee members who help connect landowners and educate Texans about conservation easements. We have a wonderful festival called Putting Down Roots we hold every November. And then we have the Great Grow Out program, which I'll talk about in our next slide. We bring teams out, corporate groups, school groups, church groups, anyone who wants to volunteer. And then our preserve stewards are with us 3 days a week, every week, taking care of the preserves and also educating visitors who come out. Megan was telling me that she had another speaker talk about pocket prairies last year. We love pocket prairies, and anytime we get a call or an email from a group who wants to set up a pocket prairie, we're always very excited. We love supporting those efforts. We encourage them to do a great grow out workshop with us. We encourage them to go seed collecting with us. And we encourage them to come visit a restored prairie so they can learn more about that process, whether it's a half acre or 50 acres. This is a wonderful program that we also encourage people to join, the Homegrown National Park movement, started by Doug Tallamy's group. And then the National Wildlife Federation also has certifications for your wildlife habitat. The Native Prairies Association of Texas also has great support for pocket prairies and can designate your pocket prairie through their organization as well. So our Great Grow Out program, this is a way for people to get involved with us from home. And so we host Great Grow Out workshops for any group who can get at least 10 people in the room. We bring native seed of various species. We bring germination trays, germination soils, and then we lead an educational talk and a hands-on portion where we get those volunteers started with their germination trays, train them how to care for those prairie seedlings. Once they're big enough, they bump them up, they bring them back to our nursery, and we're able to plant those in the ground. I love this picture. We had a gentleman volunteering who loved his Whataburger. So he would repurpose his Whataburger cups for his seedlings when he would bump them up. So it's a great use for that. There's a QR code there to get to our Great Grow Out page. And if you're just an individual, we also can meet up with you at our field nursery or in the Houston area and get you started with seeds and with trays so you can grow out plants at home. A benefit of the Great Grow Out program is that you can keep species that you're growing. Our growers keep some of the plants that they grow for their own pocket prairies. Another great way to get involved with prairie conservation is to come out to the Katy Prairie, where you can learn and see some living laboratories, grasslands that we have restored. The Indian Grass Preserve is where our Welcome Center and our field office and our nursery are. This prairie is a young prairie. We did dirt work to restore the wetlands there in 2014. We seeded that prairie in 2017. So today, this prairie is only 9 years old. Prairies take as long as forests to mature. So we do a lot of intensive management, removing invasive species, replanting natives in those areas, monitoring wildlife, and we are continuing that process. So we've also just recently had a ribbon cutting opening of the Welcome Center and our new bird blind, our native educational gardens, and then I'll show you our Blazing Star Prairie, which is a brand new preserve section just south of our Welcome Center. So here's what I was referencing. This is the Indian Grass Preserve timeline, looking at old aerial maps where Indian grass is in Waller County. This was Prairie, of course. This was the historic Katy Prairie. Then there was a family that rice farmed it for decades. That family sold it to a chemical company called Roman Toss, and they separated it into these 15-acre tracts where they tested primarily fertilizers on different crops. They even had orchards. There's still a remnant pecan orchard at the top of our property. They also had rice, corn, peach orchards. And this building was their field office. And that's still where we are today, where our Welcome Center is. So you can see in 2014 where we started restoring those wetlands. We looked at old aerials. We did soil testing to locate where those wetlands were before rice farming plowed them away. We redug those wetlands, added in trails, and seeded that prairie in 2017. So again, it's a young prairie. It's beautiful today, and we're very proud of it. And so it helps to inspire people to get started on their own prairie restoration project. Another exciting development on the Katy Prairie is the Blazing Star Prairie. So this is on the southern section of our preserve, and I'll show you that on our next map. But what's unique about Blazing Star is it's roughly 68 acres. We did the same process. We looked at old aerials, tested soils, and chose these two sites for prairie pothole restorations. We did two cover crops to enhance the soils here, because again, this had been rice farmed and then grazed non-native grasses. So we wanted to remove those invasives, get the soil healthy. And then just this past October, we planted this prairie with a no-till drill. We seeded it with native grasses and wildflowers, about 40 different species. And we named this preserve after the blazing star, after Liatris, this beautiful wildflower that will bloom this summer. What's unique about this site, as Megan mentioned, I'm also a funeral director. We now run a conservation cemetery. So this 7.7 acres is dedicated as a cemetery. We've only been open a year and a half, and we have only had 15 burials so far. But we only allow green burials, and they're widely spaced. And each burial, the family actually does prairie restoration as part of the burial service. They spread native prairie hay, and they spread wildflower and grass seeds onto that plot, and actually help us to continue restoration as part of the service. So it's been a really meaningful, beautiful way, again, for people to get involved with prairies and to have a more deep connection to them. This is a zoomed out map of the Katy Prairie. One thing I love about working for Coastal Prairie Conservancy is that our work never stops. As a land trust, we're always looking to grow. We're always looking for lands that we can help to protect in Southeast Texas. So this map is from 2024 of the Katy Prairie Preserve System. And then I will fast forward to today. This is actually winter 2025. We closed on, I think it was actually February that we closed on this site. So you can see once again where we've grown. We purchased these tracts from the landowner, and then that same landowner had family land that he put under conservation easement with us. So his family still owns that land, and he's an avid duck hunter. So he's got beautiful wetlands on his property, and he farms corn and milo for ducks. So he's a wonderful landowner. And our land trust now holds the rights in perpetuity to never develop that land. So it's a partnership with the landowner. That's what we call a conservation easement. where the landowner can continue owning their land, but they have the peace of mind that the land trust is going to protect the values of their land, so that even if it's inherited or sold in decades to come, it will always retain its open land and agricultural use, but it can never be developed or parceled up. Our goal is again to reach 30,000 acres of protected land on the Katy Prairie. So we're looking and working with the landowners who neighbor us to close conservation easements on these gaps that you see on the landscape. And then over the next 10 years, we'll hit our goal of protecting at least 30,000 acres of the historic Katy Prairie. We'll zoom out now to Houston, the Katy Prairie, and beyond. So this is a map created by a very talented landscape architect named Lauren Brown. She made this beautiful educational map that shows where we work today. So we were the Katy Prairie Conservancy. We changed our name 3 years ago to the Coastal Prairie Conservancy to reflect where we're working to partner with Texas landowners to protect their lands. So you can see Spread Oaks Ranch, for example, in Matagorda County, the Dowdy Ranch, the Brazos Tower, Tomlinson Farm. We partnered with Galveston Bay Foundation to protect this East Galveston Bay Preserve. In Lavaca, we've got preserves protected. So we're always looking to partner with other landowners who are interested in that peace of mind and interested in retaining the values of their property. What's exciting for us is that there's wonderful partners, and this PowerPoint slide shows just some of those partners. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has great programs. We work with them a lot. Texas Parks and Wildlife has landowner incentive, pastures for upland birds programs. Quail Forever and the Sea Grip program are great. So there's funding out there for landowners to do habitat improvement work and to help pay that landowner for an easement that will protect their property. So we encourage, if you're a landowner, a great way to get involved in prairie conservation is to talk to a land trust like us or like the Native Prairie Association, or to talk to your local NRCS office about habitat improvement work you can do and also about an easement. We run a great website called prairiepartner.org where we highlight these programs, how they work, how you can get involved, and then we have staff who can connect with landowners individually and even make a site visit to their property. There's two more maps here. These are maps showing the regional conservation partnership programs. The Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative was one we started, I believe, in 2022, and that one is wrapping up now. The Texas Grasslands and Savannas Initiative was one that was paused when the federal administration changed this last year. But we are renewing and reapplying for Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative funds right now with the U.S. Department of Ag. And so if you're a landowner in any of these counties in Southeast Texas and you're interested in prairie conservation, we'd love to talk with you about habitat improvement work or permanent conservation of your property. And if you're not a landowner with acres and acres of lands, as I'm certainly not, we can all appreciate Texas is 96% privately owned. So a key way for us to preserve habitats in our state especially is to work with those private landowners because we don't have a lot of public lands in Texas. So providing habitat for all of us means getting landowners to conserve their lands. So my last slide, and then we'll be able to take questions, is just a summary. Prairie ecosystems are rare and are disappearing. They are being developed every day. Prairie ecosystems provide benefits to all of us, whether we are in that prairie or far away in a city. Prairie restoration is possible and exciting to do from half an acre to 5,000 acres. And prairie champions, people who will talk about grasslands and prairies, and volunteers are always needed. There's a lot of momentum right now with native gardening and pocket prairies and habitat, wildscaping. So we're very excited about all of that. And then Coastal Prairie Conservancy works with Texas landowners to do projects like this. And I'd love to hear from any of you, whether that means you'd like to come volunteer or visit or you're interested in great grow out, or you're interested in seed collecting, we'd love to get you involved in any projects. So my last slide is just our contact information, my email. And then we love people to follow us on Instagram. We have the Coastal Prairie Conservancy account, as well as our Nature's Burial account for the Conservation Cemetery. So I'll be glad to take questions now. Let me see if there's any in the chat.
Yeah, it looks like there's two, Bethany, so
All
far.
right. Okay.
If you don't have it pulled up yet, I've got it here. The first question was back to the beginning of your presentation where you showed the decline in a lot of bird species, that there was a spike in shorebirds, and there's a question as to why the spike in shorebird populations.
Yeah. A lot of those shorebird species are still seeing declines overall. So I don't know why that particular slide shows that spike. I do know that there was a huge push starting in the 80s and 90s to do wetland restoration, Ducks Unlimited, Coastal Conservation. Those organizations really helped people to start to get excited about wetland projects. So that has certainly helped shorebirds. But there are many species of shorebirds like long-billed curlews, upland sandpipers, that are still declining. So, but yeah, I'd have to do more research on that particular question.
Okay.
And
The next
then,
question, are you seeing the chat? You could probably,
yeah,
yeah, go for it.
areas of heat being developed. Not that I know. No, I haven't heard anything about the use of peat. I know they use peat in Europe. They used to historically, but I haven't heard of anything currently. Let's see. Okay. And then Jojo Bradbury had asked about visiting properties under easement. Yes, there's still, you do need permission from the landowner. Our preserves on the Katy Prairie, we have several public access points that are open dawn to dusk for people to visit, including Warren Lake, Blazing Star, Aber Reservoir. But the private landowners, they provide access that's up to them. So some of them have events, and we partner with them to host workshops, tours, or seed collecting events. And some of them even host their own events and will lead tours of their property. But I don't know of any private conservation easement properties that you can just visit, when you feel like it. And then Catherine had asked about areas around Lufkin. Yeah, even in the piney woods and the post oak savannas, those regions still historically had natural fire cycles that had openings within those trees. So there were certainly native species like little bluestem that were blanketing between widely spaced mature pines or mature post oaks. So yes, absolutely, you can look at resources online for species that are locally native to your area, wildflower.org. The BONAP maps are a great resource to check which grasses, which prairie species were found in East Texas, like where you are in Lufkin. But absolutely, there were grasslands all over Texas before we modified many of our landscapes. And is there? Yes. So for the Katy Prairie, JoJo is asking which are open to the public, which you need permission for. We have a great interactive map called explorecoastalprairie.org, and I'll put that in the chat. And that shows currently, like it's a live interactive map, so it shows what's available, where you can just go and visit, what has certain hours, and that's also on our website, coastalprairieconservancy.org, on the plan your visit page. And you can see the conservation easement properties on that interactive map as well, and you'll see that it doesn't show, there's no public access to those private properties, but they are protected. Tom asked, what has been the largest hesitation from landowners from putting properties under conservation easement? The biggest hesitation is that it's in perpetuity, that it's forever, it's permanent, and so there has to be a level of trust and confidence in the land trust that they're working with, and that can take years of conversations and meetings. Often it really helps if a neighbor who has a conservation easement talks to their own neighbors and says what a benefit it's been having a land trust or the NRCS as a partner, supporting them, touring their properties with them, advising them in conservation habitat projects. Um, because we do monitor those properties and we do maintain, a committed partnership with that landowner. So we educate them about that benefit. And then letting landowners know that every conservation easement that is written is custom written. So if they have, like, they want to build a home for their grandchildren, you can put in your map of your property a building envelope that you're saying this is not habitat, this is where we're going to build a structure like another house. So things like that, or if you have certain values like you farm corn or you have cattle in certain pastures, you put all that on your map when you develop an easement, so that you continue to use your property exactly the way that you want to. All right. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Yes, Felicia asked if there are tax rebates. Absolutely. There are very good tax rebates for putting your land under easement. And then there's also, you're also typically paid for that value. Your property is appraised when you go through the conservation easement process. And the Conservancy or those government programs I showed listed help to pay that landowner for that conservation easement, for the in perpetuity right to never develop their land. So there's definitely financial incentives for doing this as well. Oh yeah, someone had asked about native seeds, and Marilyn answered Native American Seed. That's a wonderful family-run company in Junction. There's also Bammert Seed and Douglas Seed, and Texas A&M has a native seed lab where they're putting together seeds, and then Houston Wilderness and I believe Harris County Flood Control also have a Harris County Prairie seed blend that they're working on right now. So again, there's a lot of momentum. Let's see. Debbie asked one more question. What do you do on the easements in perpetuity? For the conservation easements, we are required to monitor those at least once a year. So we go out to the property, tour with the landowner, and look for any changes. Of course, we're looking for any issues. Typically, there's not. Typically, our landowners we partner with are wonderful stewards of their properties, and we help them. Like if we notice invasive species coming in, we can identify those and advise them on good treatments. And if they have other issues, we look for issues like roads, boundaries, making sure everything's still following the plan for their easement. All right. I think we got them all. I know it's a big topic. We covered a lot today.
We sure did. Thank you so much, Bethany, for spending your lunch hour with us today. Thank
Yeah.
all of you for tuning in to Wild at Work. If anybody wants to access this presentation after we wrap up today, it'll be posted to the Texas Wildlife Association website under Wild at Work. You can also find it if you go directly to YouTube and look up our Wild at Work YouTube page. It'll be found there as well. So you're more than welcome to go access this for just looking at these resources once again if you choose to do so. Um, Once again, Bethany, thank you very much, and thanks everybody. I hope y'all have a good rest of your afternoon.
All right. Thank you all.